right now. Republican Michael McCaul of the beautiful state of Texas serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee that would be kicking off this hearing. I understand, Congressman, as soon as next week.
We'll have a classified briefing going into next week and a public hearing probably when we return in September. We obviously have a lot of questions to ask from this administration. It's been, in my view, Neil, real dereliction of duty by the commander-in-chief. He has a stain on this presidency with this ill-conceived evacuation, which is utter chaos at the airport. My numbers are that there are 10 to 15,000 Americans, and only 20% of those have actually escaped out of the Kabul airport. Meanwhile, the Taliban has circled the perimeter and are beating people with chains as they try to get into the perimeter to get on one of these flights. You heard Kirby, the spokesman for the Pentagon, had no idea who were even on these flights. And I'm getting also reports that some of these flights are only half full. They're half empty. How does this happen?
Who decides who decides then, Congressman, do you know who's getting through that perimeter that the Taliban has set up around the airport? Who gets through? Who decides that? It seems to me that it's the Taliban deciding that, and that we're leery of going to that perimeter to force the issue, at least for now.
Well, they're flexing their muscle. It's embarrassing and pathetic that the United States of America has an unconditional surrender to a terrorist organization and then begging them to please back off of our evacuation. That is a situation on the ground that we're in right now. I have had thousands of veterans contact the Foreign Affairs Committee trying to get their interpreters out, trying to get their loved ones out, trying to get American citizens out. And we can't process all this. And they got caught flat-footed. We warned them last summer to start preparing. If you're going to do this, do it right. Have the SIV applicants, have the American citizens, have the planes ready to go. And you had that story about Putin now flexing his muscle against Biden. We're projecting weakness when Putin tells the commander-in-chief, the United States president, that he cannot put a base of operations for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
Yeah, and that was before all of this hit the proverbial fan, to your point, Congressman. And what Putin said was that that was not an option, and for the U.S. to establish any base of Afghanistan wasn't an option. But how did he finally have veto power on the issue? Why couldn't we force the issue with other countries in the area? Or did we try?
Well, because we're projecting weakness, not strength. And the international community sees this, Neil. They view us as a weak country now. It's impacting our status around the world, failed leadership. Why will we allow Putin to dictate to our commander-in-chief what he can and cannot do? So what we're talking about here is intelligence, right? We have no intelligence anymore. Bagram shut down our ISR capability, dark. The embassy, dark. We use that to not only see Afghanistan threats from within, like ISIS and al-Qaeda, but also China, Russia, and Iran. Neil, we cannot see the threats coming out of the region now. And when I talk to the commanders and veterans, this is really putting us in a very compromising situation.
Do you think that when the president said there was no intelligence, and even his top military brass were saying, including the chairman of his Joint Chiefs of Staff, that there was no way to have foreseen or anyone have a discussion of the country falling within days, let alone weeks or months?
Neil, and I hate to be so strong, but it's a lie. If I'm getting these briefings, I'd sure as heck hope the President of the United States is. You know, and the fact is, the IC assessment, Neil, all summer long has been very, very grim. That the Taliban was going to rove around the country, the Afghan army would fall without our air cover, and somehow the president blames the intelligence community. This is absolutely a lie. The IC was correct in their assessment, and it was very grim, and they had a 6-month and 90-day assessment. And the fact is, they chose to ignore the intelligence community, and he ignored his top generals, by the way, in my judgment. And, you know, Milley's, I've known him for a long time. I'm a little disappointed that he would say something like that they had no warning in advance about this. I certainly did. just in my position in Congress. And
When
I think
you say you
find
had warning that the country could fall in a matter of days, that you got that kind of intelligence or access to that?
Well, I think it did happen faster, even faster than the IC, but they always said during the fighting season, then they said 90 days. But the point is, it was a very grim assessment. State Department kept going back to this rosy picture of, oh, we're negotiating with the Taliban in Doha. Everything's going to be fine. You can't negotiate with the Taliban. I talked to Mike Pompeo this morning, former Secretary of State, and, the idea that somehow this is Trump's fault and that President Trump, that his February agreement had something to do with this, what Pompeo told me was they were in constant contact, and when they violated the agreement, like, not cutting ties with al-Qaeda or hitting provincial capitals, there was an immediate, swift response with air support. Yeah. They were bombed. And the problem is we have a weak president now who has unleashed the Taliban on this country. And what I fear for the most are the women left behind in the state that they're going to be put in when they're enslaved and treated like property.
Yeah, it does make you wonder whatever you think of Donald Trump, but I mean, for the administration to argue that it inherited this policy and then to kind of stick with that, when it, in fact, overturned by executive order or other fiats, almost everything else Donald Trump did, it just been credulity here. But Congressman, thank you very, very much for joining us on this. By the way, it's not just Republicans who are bashing the president here. We've been talking about